The Islamic State, ISIS, had two main objectives. The first one was to enlarge its territory, and the second one was to repel, to avoid the new offensive by the Iraqi troops. Let's start from the second one. As we know, there was an agreement between the Obama administration and the Iraqi government to start at the end of the spring, at the beginning of the summer, a very important military offensive to retake the city of Mosul, the biggest city in the hands of the caliphate in what was once Iraq. And the aim of the Americans and the Iraqis was to start from Mosul, to retake Mosul, because 1 year ago, the caliphate that was declared on June 29, 2014, began with Mosul. The main offensive that took place in 2014 and that put the condition on the ground to declare the caliphate had the main objective, main result in taking Mosul. So the idea of Obama and the new premier Abadi was, let's take Mosul back and let's try to dismantle the caliphate in northern Iraq. Now, the strategy of the caliphate was exactly the opposite. And to avoid even the start of the offensive against Mosul, the decision taken by al-Anbari, that is the former Iraqi general that is leading the caliphate army in Iraq, was to open a new front of offensive against Baghdad in the Anbar region, that, as we know, is the most Sunni region, most inhabited by Sunni in northern Iraq. And actually they succeeded, because they started with Basij, that is the most important refinery of Iraq. And then they went on Ramadi, and they took Ramadi. And now they have their troops more or less at 120, 125 kilometers from Baghdad. This means that the Iraqi government has to defend its capital, has to reassess its strategy, and that the plan to attack Mosul is completely gone. So this was the first and most important, from a tactical point of view, objective of Ramadi. And on the other side, in Palmyra, apparently was a side offensive, possible because the Syrian army literally collapsed. But the reality is that the results are more important than in Ramadi, for the simple reason that the ISIS troops are closer to Damascus than to Baghdad, less than 70 kilometers now, because they went on after Palmyra. And the capabilities of the Syrian armies are much less than of the Iraqi army. But these are the tactical these are the tactical improvement of the caliphate, what they were able to do it. But the reality and the most important political objective is to enlarge the territory, because we don't have to forget that the caliphate is a territorial entity, is a state, or wants to be a state, wants to be a bold state. And to be that, he needs more territory, more resources, more population, more of everything. But basically, what he needs the most is to enlarge itself. Since the idea of the caliphate goes back to the origin of Islam, according to what they say, and at the origin of the Islam, the Prophet was enlarging continuously the original territory that he was ruling, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi wants to do exactly the same. So to legitimate himself in front of his followers, he needs to enlarge continuously the caliphate. He cannot stay still. He has to move on. And this is exactly what he's doing. It's a very interesting question, but the answer has to do with the identity of the caliphate. That is double. The first one is the idea of the state, to build an Islamic state with resources, institutions, senior officers, bureaucracy, and so on and so on. because being a state means to be able to attract more and more followers, volunteers, freedom fighters, and believers. So first of all, we have to look at them as they want to be. What is important is the idea of the identity that they have for the Islamic State. And of course, is a state who wants to stay, to remain as a state with continuous enlarging borders, but as a state, as a new state in the Middle East. We have to realize that. And by the way, what is happening on the map is suggesting us that they are succeeding, because Syria doesn't exist anymore. Iraq doesn't exist anymore. So actually they are building new realities that does exist on the map. But it's not all, because the second part of the question is also right. They are a brand. And if they are able to have velayat provinces in Nigeria with Boko Haram, in Libya with Islamic States, in Sinai, in the Egyptian desert with Beit al-Maqdis, and in many other places. There was a recent study published in the US that tells more or less that there are 7 or 8 Muslim states with Islamic State velayat. If this is happening, if they're succeeding in having these cells, these Islamic cells, identifying with them, is because the brand works. And the brand works also in Europe, because you have this phenomenon of the lone wolves from Glasgow to Paris, from London to Berlin, where single people, they identify with themselves with the brand. Now, why the brand exists, and the brand is, how can the brand coexist with the identity of the state? In common, they have the ideology. The ideology, on one hand, in the state, realizes itself as a state. On the other hand, outside the state, it's a virus. And it's a terrible virus because it's based on violence. We have to be honest. The Arab world is collapsing. The system of state that was built since the end of First World War is disappearing. And this is happening in the Sunni world because these states, in most of the cases, they lack legitimacy and they don't have the trust of their own people. The Islamic State is a serious threat to their own, to these countries, first of all, and also to us, because what he's proposing, the idea to go back to the old Bilad al-Sham, the old nation of the Levant of Prophet Muhammad, it's something that in Middle East, many people really believe. They identify themselves with much more than with the modern state. So in the area that includes what we call today Iraq, Syria, Israel, Palestinian territories, Lebanon, Jordan, all these countries, that, from another point of view, they don't have legitimacy, while the Bilad al-Sham, the old nation of the Levant, it has it. So this means that the strength of the caliphate is the need for the Sunni people to identify with a Sunni reality that has an historical legitimacy. And this goes far beyond the issue of violence, beheading, and all that, and explains why the support is so spreading out. Also because all these Sunni clans, families, tribes, towns, villages, they feel themselves threatened by the Shia. There is a general perception in this part of the world that the Shia states, tribes, and clans and families are on the rise, are on the offensive. They are gaining ground. They are building a new Middle East from Tehran to Damascus, from Beirut to Sana'a, and the Sunni are on the defensive. So I was in Lebanon. I spoke with a lot of families in a city called Tripoli, and you go there, you speak with them, you will hear from them. They say, look, who is defending us? The Shia are coming. We miss leaders. Who is the leader of the Sunni world today? Now, because of the lack of Sunni leaders, because of the strength of the Shia offensive, Sunnis are going more and more towards the caliphate. And this gives to the perspective of the Islamic State a very, very strong possibility to succeed.